You are listening to a production of the Toll Network, home of biting analysis. This is Moonspeak Phase 3, Episode 38. Don't bite into that donut, Sailor Moon. It's dangerous. Go ahead.
Oh God, I love this movie. I'm Sono. I'm here.
Yeah, and I'm Ammit. Welcome to Moonspeak Phase 3, your mostly monthly source for general Sailor Moon discussion and analysis. We're just talking about the movies now, but Crystal Season 4 will be out at some point this year in 2017, right?
Hopefully. We have gotten confirmation that it's happening, which lines up nicely with us doing this movie, because it lines up with that section of the story, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with it.
Naturally.
I mean, that's good. It doesn't, put us ahead of what you know story-wise, so I'm glad for that.
Yeah, that is nice. I was kind of disappointed no Saturn in this one. Was there ever a movie with Saturn in it?
I don't believe so. She had some stuff going on in this phase of the story. If you remember, she was a little baby again.
Oh, that's right. Duh. I just figured they would have, went into the future and then brought back older Hotaru, and that would have been it, but, whatever.
I mean, look, they don't explain how the three of them showed up anyway, so...
This is true.
But no, it's just the three of them. Unfortunately, there's not any movies that she's in. Maybe they'll make some movies for Crystal, some specials
cool.
or something, and have her hanging out a little bit more.
That'd be a lot of fun. Well, let's really get into this thing. So today we're discussing Super Sailor Moon S, the movie, which has a really cool Japanese subtitle, but I forgot what it was now and I didn't write it down. Do you know it by any chance?
Oh God, I can't believe I do know this offhand. It's The Nine Soldiers Gather, Miracle of the Black Dream Hole.
Ah, there you go. Oh man, what a great title.
For a great movie.
Yeah. Alright, so, as we're wont to do now, do you want to let us know, some of the people who worked on this thing?
Our director was, Hiroki Shibata. Our screenplay was Yoji Enokito, who I looked up quickly and did a lot of writing on, classic 90s, early 2000s, or 80s, 90s, really. Sailor Moon, Utena, Evangelion, FLCL.
Okay.
If you want to go for some early 2000s. I believe he also did a novelization of FLCL.
See?
So he's got some big credits kind of around this time period.
Okay, that's cool. Alright, well, I'd like to start us off with a couple potential titles. I only had two this time. The first potential title was Tuxedo Slippers.
God bless.
Yeah, I'll have a picture up for this in the show notes, but Mamoru has little tuxedo masks on his slippers, and it's pretty fantastic.
Makoto maybe made those for him. In all of her craftiness, was just like, here man, Merry Christmas. I didn't know what else to give you.
Right. And then another one, which is this is a great dub line here. It's "Go Bon Bon Babies," and that's when who's the principal fairy? Who's the main aggressor in this movie? Because I didn't catch his name.
Oh God, I can't remember his name. Just okay. Peru's brother.
Okay, well he was furious when the Senshi showed up and wanted to stop him, and that was I guess he threw his candies out, he did candy wrappers and then he commanded them and apparently...
that is actually what they're called.
Oh, really?
That wasn't a weird... Of all the weird changes in this dub, that is not one of them.
Well, you know what? That's a great name, and I don't know why anybody would ever try to... I mean, it's pre-localized. It's right there for you. I mean, you don't have to do anything. But anyway, so those things really stood out to me. But some other fun stuff from the movie. I loved the intro outro, because they replayed the intro as the outro, showing all the scouts as kids. They were so adorable.
Yeah, no, I've always really liked this. It's so cute, and it sets up the theme of the movie really nicely, and all of these shots tell you so much about the girls. Like, Rey is in, this really pretty, proper, taking this kind of New Year's photo, I think, kind of all dressed up in her kimono, and then, beats some boys half to death with a bat when they come and mess with her.
I really personally loved Minako watching all the TV and just absorbing everything from Idols to, Clint Eastwood and whatever that movie was, Fistful of Dollars or whatever. Just like that. It was so cool.
Yeah, no, it was really precious.
Anyway, it's funny. I don't remember if both movies did this. Both of the other two movies did it, but I know the last one did. But they do an intro with the music and just showing the girls in their lives, and those serve really, really well to give you a glimpse of their personality. And I love that, because if you're coming into a movie as either someone who this is your first time seeing it at all, or you're someone like me who's vaguely familiar with the 90s anime itself, they're doing the groundwork. The people working on it are really setting the groundwork for you to have an understanding of who all the girls are, and it's great. It's really done well. It's really well done, and it's really necessary for you to be able to connect to everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry, my next note is Chibiusa kind of being excited that the scouts were all changed to her age was kind of cute, even though it happened in the middle of a terrible situation.
Yeah, I always kind of wished they did more with that scene, because it feels like there's so much room to play there, and it doesn't last long enough.
And then another thing that really, I enjoyed it, but it was, awful, was the whole Pied Piper element. It was kind of terrifying, and it was really effectively creepy. I think the song, in the dub is the same as the song in the Japanese, because it's...
Yeah, I don't think they don't dub the song at all. If my memory serves correctly, they just use the same audio track of the kids singing in Japanese.
Yeah, and...
Sure, why not? I don't think they wanted to take the time and effort to get 30 kids to dub a new version of this song.
Yeah, I'm sure. But it was really good and really creepy, and actually the song kind of it got stuck in my head for a little bit, just the tune of it,
Oh yeah, no, I have known this song since my childhood. But yeah, no, the Pied Piper thing is always such a weird, creepy thing. Anytime I see it used, I remember it being in Bokenger, other things, cause it's such a pervasive, folklore thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it was used really effectively here, since we establish, with Peru really early on that, they have these powers, but that's not really what they're for. They're not supposed to be leading children away with these, but, doing cute things like making cookies dance or whatever. And it kind of takes a little bit of the edge off of Peru once you find out that, he's one of the ones who's supposed to be doing this. It's like, oh, okay, they're not normally evil. Something's just going on.
Right. It seems like, these fairies just got, co-opted into, what's the lady's name? Badania?
Yeah. Or Badianu? Something.
Badianu, that sounds
something like
right.
that. And I think I've mentioned on the other two movies we did. This one was my favorite as a kid, as kind of little sense as it makes. And I had a big dumb crush on Peru when I was 11. One of my really early anime crushes was this kid. But I still really love, the design work on the 3 o'clock fairies. The whole group of them are just really neat to look at. and just all of the really, like, concept stuff in this movie I still think is really great.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that went into them, or into everything, like the gondolas and just everything's really, really intricate, and I definitely like the look of it all.
Yeah, like, and they play with a lot of folklore stuff in this, like the 3 o'clock fairies, the Pied Piper stuff, the kind of castle in the sky mythos. Lots of neat stuff being played here, where I feel like they really could have expanded this into, like, a whole season if they really wanted to.
I'm actually not so familiar, or really familiar with these 3 o'clock fairies. Could you give me a short little?
I mean, like, the mythos for this kind of exists within this movie. I've never really heard of outside.
Okay.
I didn't watch the dub of this, so I don't know how much they went into it. In kind of describing the little internal folklore of it.
Yeah, I think if they did, it totally went in one ear and out the other, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, you have this whole beginning scene where everyone's at Makoto's house making cookies for whatever reason. Just, they're hanging out, being friends, making cookies because they want to.
Right.
And they set up a lot of the themes of the movie in this one scene, which I skimmed through. I know we're going to talk about the dub kind of verses later, but skimming through that scene dubbed, I think they kind of skipped a lot of the themes they used this scene for establishing. But I've always really loved this scene. It gives us a lot of cute insights into the girls' lives, kind of pre-being soldiers. And you've got Ami being like, oh yeah, no, I used to get depressed as a kid, and my mom wasn't always home, but when she was, she'd make me these cookies and, tell me like, oh, these'll increase your happiness 100-fold, and that's kind of where that idea starts. Is, like, that's where Chibiusa, I think, kind of picks it up from, is Ami saying that, and she's like, oh, well, I always felt really better, and I thought, okay, maybe it's not so bad having sad times every now and then, because then I get to have this happy thing. And Makoto's like, oh yeah, my mom used to do the same thing for me, and then the clock strikes 3. And she's like, oh, it's the 3 o'clock fairy already. And they're like, wait, what? What are you talking about?
Wow.
She's like,
okay. No,
did they just completely skip over this?
They completely skipped over. She was talking about how at 3 o'clock...
God.
Yeah, how at 3 o'clock, that was like their cookie time. Like her mom would make cookies to last the whole week long, but they were always best on Monday because that's when she would make them, and her mom would make them because Monday's the worst day, and so she'd make a huge pile of cookies, and then at 3 every day, they would have some.
Yeah, it was kind of like that, but she was like, oh, my mom would always make me all these things, and then I'd always ask her, like, oh, why do you always make cookies at 3 o'clock? And she's like, oh, well, the 3 o'clock fairy tells moms to make snacks for their kids at 3 o'clock. And Makoto was like, oh, well, I didn't really understand what she meant by that, so I always assumed it was the bird in the cuckoo clock.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then they kind of tie that in later with, the actual 3 o'clock fairies. When they're defeated, they turn into the cuckoo clock birds.
Right.
And it makes the little, and I guess they just completely kind of skip over the actual folklore at the core of this movie. Yikes. In the dub of this movie.
Which is funny because, like, I picked up on the visual cues. Like, the cuckoo clock shows up 2 or 3 times at least, and I noticed, in that town, in the, German town or whatever that they showed in the beginning, where Peruru was, there's a cuckoo clock there's a cuckoo clock over at Makoto's, and, it just kind of... And then, the guys get turned into birds after, or, when they're hit with the attacks.
Does it still play the cuckoo clock sound effect in the dub? When that happens?
I don't remember. Is it just a cuckoo, or is it something more?
No, it's just that. When they get turned into birds. I mean,
I
you may
don't
have just,
remember.
like, missed it because there's other sounds happening on top of it, so it's a little hard to... It's easy to miss, I guess.
Yeah, I would say so.
But wow. Good. We're gonna talk a bit about the dub because there's a lot of weird dialogue changes. Including, I make a comment that Diana is adorable and innocent in my notes, and I guess in the dub, having, skimmed through that scene, they cut out a lot of that. But I don't, in the dub, does Chibiusa make a comment about Neo Queen Serenity? When they're all talking about their moms?
I think she does, but it's, you know what, it's a little obfuscated, because it almost sounds like she's talking about, well, look, Usagi is Usagi, and she will be forever. So,
yeah.
when Chibiusa said that, her mom always, burns things, I assume she was still talking about, Neo Queen Serenity.
Yeah,
but
because
it could have been either.
In the dialogue, she specifically says, like, in the future, my mom is still, like, even in the future, my mom is burning cookies. And I love that, we have this Neo Queen Serenity who's changed so much from the one we saw in the Black Moon arc, that she's now this benevolent, all-powerful god queen 1,000 years in the future, living in this giant crystal palace at the center of this perfect, like, utopia, and is trying and failing to make cookies for her child.
Yeah, that is really adorable.
Like, that's probably one of my favorite mental images. But, my favorite part of this movie in general, just, the Outers inexplicably showing up and completely changing the topic and refusing to explain how they actually physically got there every time they're asked. And this was another dub change, that I guess I just wanted to check for no reason, but Ami says, instead of, oh, we're glad you're here to help, she's just like, hey, how did you guys get here? And instead of answering, Haruka in the dub, she gives that, you can always count on us line. She just says, oh, there's all this dark energy gathering in this castle. Instead of answering.
That's great.
And, the fairy guy's like, how the heck did you guys find us? How did you get here? And Michiru's just like, oh yeah, you can't hide stuff from my mirror. It's like, that doesn't explain how you got into space. Thanks, guys. I guess I kind of assume that Setsuna did something, because she's just like, hey, is Small Lady in danger? Because I can sense that, apparently. Like, my Chibiusa senses were tingling, and something felt wrong, so I teleported us all to space, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds... She is the guardian of time and space, so you know.
So she can just, do this stuff.
Yeah, I buy it.
But, it's just... I just find it hysterical that they show up out of nowhere to save the day, but don't really explain how or why.
I kind of chalk that up to them being drama queens again.
Well, as they are. Like, we can't tell them the, like, awkward, like, the actual secret of how we got here, because that's, like, awkward technical details that are kind of weird. We have to remain, like, cool and mysterious.
Of course. I think we're ready to move on to theme talk.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, I'm gonna be a little verbose here, but hopefully everything I say is...
That's okay.
I'm
also gonna be kind of verbose.
Okay. Alright, I picked out 3 themes that resonated really strongly with me in watching the movie, and, the first one is reality versus dreams. So here we go. Getting lost in a pleasant illusion is one of my favorite concepts to explore in media. It was the low-key focus of Persona 4. It's a major attack that almost destroys the heroes in Digimon 02, or Adventure 02, whatever. And it was really neat to see it here too. I think the villain tactic is a lot of fun because of the insight it gives us into the characters who we don't really get to know as well through all the nonstop action of certain media. I mean, like, even episode to episode, sometimes you don't really get to know the characters that well. Anyway, I'm not going to say that Sailor Moon doesn't do a really good job of giving those insights into the characters as it goes along, but I will say that the movies do it better than the 90s anime, and I think the 90s anime does it better overall for everyone who isn't Usagi than Sailor Moon Crystal does. I mean, Sailor Moon Crystal Season 1 was definitely the Usagi Mamoru show, and then Season 2, it was more focused on the others, but still, there could be more. One more aside, in Persona 4, the protagonist is almost entirely an avatar for the player, but the anime did this perfect illusion tactic in a way that really served to define him as a character while somehow leaving, like, all his personal details almost undisclosed, which is funny. It was interesting and it worked well. So back to the point, media with the threat of the perfect illusion is something I enjoy so much for the fact that the viewer is engrossed in this fictional world and then is given the suggestion to look at themselves and wonder if they are falling into the same trap as the characters they love and identify with.
Yeah, and it's an idea that I also really love in media. I feel like Magic Knight Rayearth played with it a couple of times. But, you know, on a lot of levels, I like how this movie specifically plays with it, because it's very much playing into Usagi's, like, number one strength. Usagi she can be selfish, but she can't conceive of a world in which she's thinking only of herself and what she wants. And it's kind of what saves her and saves everyone, because she can't really live in isolation, and she doesn't believe that anyone should have to live in isolation. So even, you know, when she gets caught up in this dream that completely 100% alleviates her insecurities, and we're going to talk about that in a broader sense in a minute, but, right, like, the second she realizes what's going on, she confirms it, and then it's just like, nope, this is a dream, and I got stuff to do. Because she'd rather kind of work out her insecurities and problems with the people she loves than have it all really easily solved, but have kind of the reality of the people she loves erased from her. And, you know, that's a thing that warms my heart. I always love that kind of thing. But my biggest issue with the movie is that I don't really get why this is happening. Like, what exactly does Badianu get out of all of this? She swallows the planet and everyone is kind of, you know, in their dream coffins, and she's absorbing their dream energy from it to do what exactly? What is her goal? What is the end game? It doesn't seem like it's supposed to be benevolent on her part, especially since we're talking about dark energy left and right. And, you know, the black dream hole is an extension of herself. So, you know, even if she's convinced the fairies, like, oh, you're gonna be helping these kids live in, you know, this happy dream forever where nothing bad ever happens. Like, what does this weird giant space woman want in the long run?
It's super vague and unclear, and I don't really get it. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add for Badianu, because she was kind of... I feel like she was just like a narrative tool, really, which is fine. Sometimes that's all your villain has to be, and I thought it hit the right notes, so I'm good with not knowing, really. But I am kind of going to touch on her in my next comments on the theme of the children being... Well, the children are our future is the title I have here for our theme. Whitney said it best, but Usagi's English was never that good, so I guess I know why she was a bit slow on the uptick. I mean, anyway. This iteration of Usagi is a little hard for me to fully wrap my mind around. I get the broad strokes of her, but I felt a little conflicted with her still bearing so much insecurity regarding Darien and Rini. Yes, those are their wonderful, wonderful dub names. Because I feel like she should be past this already. I mean, the whole, do your thing, Moon Mama line from the first movie made me feel like she should be beyond this. I say that now, but I will not deny that while I want to be Mamoru, I often find myself acting more like Usagi as a parent. So, anyway. Badianu wants to snuff out the dreams of children across the stars in order to destroy their host planets and their loved ones. It's her agenda, and she just uses and abuses children as a means to her end. When we don't check ourselves like Usagi did later in the movie, when she remembered Chibiusa's cookies and all the good in her willful, wonderful, sweet, pain-in-the-neck kid, we can act just like Badianu. I mean, and that's not just with children, that's with anybody. But I think the whole children thing there's an extra dimension there, because I think historically people have seen children as slightly less than human.
A little bit.
Yeah, and that's not how I want to be at all, and I hope that people who suffered through jerk parents will not do the same thing when they have kids. Anyway, we could go on a whole, hours, like 9-hour-long podcast about that, but I don't think we should.
We're not a parenting podcast, so.
No. Although, it would be cool to do a parenting podcast where you discuss a certain piece of media and all the stuff about parenting.
As it relates to parenting. That would be kind of neat. I mean,
that would be really
I say this as someone who does not have kids and doesn't really plan to have kids, but that's neat in concept.
Well, maybe in another life I'll have to do that. So, anyway, there was another kind of theme that came out of this children being the future thing to me. Like, a kind of conservationist or conservative, approach to dealing with the world. And by the world, I mean the actual, material of, water and plants and the air and whatnot. But, like, Badianu will go on selfishly taking for herself until there's nothing left. Like, she sure isn't thinking about the next 7 generations. While the imminent threat she poses to all life on Earth puts the Scouts in that category by default. I mean, I can't say if consciously everyone's thinking like, no, we have to preserve this world for the future, for generations beyond, the next and the next. But she's definitely saying, I'm gonna kill everybody right now to get what I want. So, it's a strange thing.
I mean, I definitely agree with you on that. It's definitely, this kind of consume everything right now versus, just, look to the future and have some thoughts about that, even if it's not, 7 generations down the line and it's just like 7 months down the line. Because I mean, even if the girls are just thinking like, hey, we don't want to be dead, they do. We know their lives extend very far into the future, into a future that they do their best to make a lot better than the present.
Mm-hmm.
It is a little, I'm gonna kind of go off on, your thoughts about Usagi though, cause I ended up just kind of with a hot take on that, I guess.
Okay.
Cause it is weird that even in Supers, and maybe into Stars, I don't totally remember, cause Mamoru isn't present in Stars, so they don't actively have him to fight over. So I don't remember if they are actively fighting over him in Stars. But they don't really get completely past that in Supers, and they never really get over this kind of weird rivalry for Mamoru, to the point where it kind of feels like a game that they play that they're not 100% serious about. Because we do see that fighting is kind of partially how they show affection to each other, and specifically how Usagi and Chibiusa show affection to each other, not really how they show affection to other people. And we kind of see that a little more openly at the end when, Badianu summons Chibiusa and Usagi's like, oh, thank God, you're okay. And Chibiusa's like, hey, you're late. And Usagi's just like, oh, hush, girl. And, they kind of have this little playful moment in which they bicker. And, Mamoru is just an easy thing for them to fight over. But then you get that scene where, like, Chibiusa isn't even there and Usagi is having this moment with Mamoru where she's like, hey, who do you care about more? And she's being incredibly dramatic about it. So it kind of feels like she wants him to be in on the game, but he just doesn't totally get it. Because, like, why would he understand this game? That's a weird thing for you two to be doing. But I'll give that, at least in this case, it's very much serving the larger narrative at hand, and the dynamic of Usagi and Chibiusa that this movie wants to play with. Because especially, you know, we give Chibiusa sort of another romantic interest in this movie, and man, I want to say Chibiusa dates everyone. Like, if we're counting Peru, by the end of this movie, she's, like, legitimately dating, like, 3 people.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
But it very much serves this kind of dynamic, and we have Usagi and Chibiusa bickering and fighting from the outset of the movie, in Makoto's kitchen, and everyone just kind of laughing about it, because it's what they do. Up until there's actual trouble. Up until suddenly Chibiusa is ripped away from Usagi. And the instant she is, Usagi is overcome by the absolute horror that her child is in danger and out of her reach. And then, you know, she very quickly swallows that and can't do anything about it isn't an option, and she has to go to space to beat up a fairy. She's like, well, this is what's gotta be done, because she needs me and I love her.
Right.
And we see that very much in Chibiusa also when she's first, you know, thrown in front of Badianu. She's not afraid, she's not screaming like, oh, you'll never get away with this, blah, blah, because it's very calm. She is 100% calm about the situation. Sailor Moon exists, and she believes in her. She outright says in the calmest voice possible, your plan is stupid, and it's gonna fail because my mom's gonna come get me and kick your butt. Like, she smiles about it. She's like, I know this is what's gonna happen, because I 100% believe in Sailor Moon and in Usagi, and Usagi reciprocates that in eating Chibiusa's cookie. She's like, I believe in her power, and, you know, this is the strength of our bond. And I mentioned that really awkward scene with Mamoru, and so much of why it feels like Usagi is trying to make him part of the game is that in the instant when we parallel that scene, and we have a Mamoru who gives in to her selfish desires, and is like, no, you're the most important, Usagi completely recoils. She then tries to play that game again. She feeds him the exact same line. Who's more important, Chibiusa or me? And when he just says, obviously you're more important, and Usagi isn't getting the reaction that she knows she should get, Usagi explicitly calls the game off. It's like, yeah, like, I still love you, but this is a dream. Like, even in my dreams, you're still great. And, you know, that immediately cuts it off. And it sits weird because Usagi and Chibiusa seem so serious about it when they go at it. And Usagi seems so serious about it when she's having this conversation with Mamoru. And, you know, it's not always just the two of them bickering back and forth. It's definitely something that's always kind of dragged them down a bit. Because especially it goes on after the point at which it's supposedly resolved. And, I mean, my interpretation of this could be totally wrong, but looking at it through this lens makes that pill a lot easier to swallow.
Yeah, and I can't really, I'm not gonna refute that, because I think it's an interesting interpretation, and it gives a lot of, there's a lot more there to examine and to think about in how everything played out, and it does lend some, I guess, some dramatic weight to the scene where she, dismisses Dream Mamoru, so,
Yeah, and I mean, like, this isn't like a lens that I've been looking through this whole time. Like, that's one I took watching it explicitly this time for this recording. So this is kind of a new take on that I'm only now kind of looking at.
Well, maybe when I do the subtitle rewatch, I can look out for that.
Maybe, and I mean, again, there are so many dialogue changes.
Well, we will get to that in Dubs versus Subs grudge match number 2. I think it's the second grudge match.
I believe so.
Yeah. So the next theme I wanted to discuss is cherishing the past versus making a better future. This almost feels like it will be difficult to unlink from reality versus dreams from above. I guess it is a different take on it, but I feel it is substantive enough that we can discuss it anyhow. The scouts are given the option to sacrifice the future for the hollow comfort of a past they can never truly reclaim. I guess really more Usagi gets that focus, or that option. Makoto says it the most directly when she insists that they'll keep fighting to make a better tomorrow for themselves. I also remember something about drawing strength from the past, but then letting go of it in order to move on to the future.
I wanted to say that I think you're remembering something that Ray says in the kitchen scene in the beginning, kind of about memories being good, but it's more important to work toward future happiness. Along with, Makoto has this line, happiness is the pursuit of happiness. But then I rewatched that scene in the dub, and that all of those lines are not there. So I'm not 100. It's when they're talking about chocolate in the dub.
Right.
And I'm gonna kind of point out those differences later. But that's what I thought you were maybe thinking of. But none of those lines exist in the dub, so I'm not sure exactly what you're pulling from.
I don't know. I guess, man, what am I thinking? I don't know, because there was a weird thing, like, where Usagi's with Badianu, and she's fighting her, and the Senshi get all their energy drained, and, like, they're gonna die or something? I mean, everybody's gonna die, but, like, specifically their energy's getting drained from them somehow, and the girls want to keep fighting, but they're, like, really having a tough time. Ugh.
It's when they get all colorful.
Yeah, when they get all colorful. And I feel like, I don't know. Maybe I'm pulling that from nowhere, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, because I didn't watch the whole dub. I just there was only a couple key scenes that I went and checked, but I do think that, like, a neat core of this is that all of them want to share this future together. They all want to, move forward so that they can share this happiness with each other and be together instead of kind of living in this perfect isolation.
Well, I didn't do a good job, but I think you salvaged it, so thank you. I don't know what happened. Alright, well, let's get to the fun part. Dubs versus Subs grudge match number 2. And I just want everybody to know, I only watched the dub this time, so I didn't really have anything to add here, but Sony, you found some good stuff.
I watched it subtitled as I do, because again, I've done my time, but there was a scene that I specifically wanted to go back and watch in the dub, because there's a line that I wanted to know how they handled it. Because again, I've never actually watched this whole movie dubbed. When I first saw it, it hadn't been dubbed yet, and I never went down that road. But there's a specific line that, now that I had the chance and we were going to be talking about it, I wanted to see how the dub handled it. After the Outers show up, they defeat the 3 fairies, and everyone kind of explains what's going on to the 3 of them. And then there's this short bit of dialogue between Haruka and Michiru in reaction to the situation, and I'm not sure if you caught it, but Michiru kind of says, "Oh, that's a really silly idea," and looks over at Haruka, and Haruka starts blushing, and, I mean, dubbed, this probably seems pretty odd, because Michiru's statement in the dub is something kind of in the vein of, "Oh, that's a silly idea, because we should live our whole lives, it's exciting from beginning to end," and that's pretty innocuous. But her original line is, "There are so many more fun things to do as adults," which, pairs with her. She then looks over at Haruka, specifically. Haruka starts blushing, and you've got this kind of knowledge of their relationship, and it's pretty obvious what she means by that statement.
Yeah. Yeah, so, You know how there's... Never mind. I was going to make a weird comment about better than sex cake, but I won't. That's a really good catch. It rang a bit off for me. In the dub, I thought there was something a little weird about that line, but I didn't really, dig into it. I missed Haruka blushing. However, I went back and rewatched after you brought this up to me, and I noticed that, if I hadn't caught her blushing, I should have noticed her, somewhat dramatically clearing her throat at the end of that little exchange. So definitely, they may have erased the line or dubbed over the line in a way that would, hide, the awkward exchange, but I think the throat clearing definitely highlights it. Like, I don't know whose decision that was in making the movie, the original movie, but, they definitely wanted people to see that and know something was being talked about, and, the dub wanted to ignore it, so.
Yeah, the 90s anime is often very explicit about Haruka and Michiru's relationship, and the fact that it's pretty sexual. And the dub very much tries to erase that to the point of making them related. Mm. And this is kind of the least egregious of the ways the dub erases their relationship. 'Cause again, it gives Michiru this pretty innocuous line, and, with the way Haruka generally acts, especially in the 90s dub, you can kind of wave off her throat clearing as an attempt to brush off Michiru being very sentimental, instead of trying to brush off the fact that she's trying to hide how mortified she is by Michiru laying open their very sexual relationship for everyone to hear about. I've never watched the full movie dubbed, so I've always kind of known that line and been very clear on Michiru's semi-subtle way of say what she was saying. So I was just very curious to hear how they handled that, since, we had a whole section, this dub versus sub grudge match. Right. Unrelated, holy heck, Haruka's dub voice is a train wreck. I mean, I'm sure the woman doing it is doing her best, but her voice doesn't suit Haruka. Also, the Outers dub voices do this very loud, overly dramatic sort of stage talking, like they're trying to project to the back of the house, and it feels very, very weird. There's also a line that I kind of went back and checked on, they're all going up on the gondola, and Pluto asks, hey, who's this kid? And in the dub, Usagi's like, oh, he's cool, he's a friend of Rini's. But the original line, she just flat out says, oh, this is Chibiusa's boyfriend. And I guess maybe the dub wanted to distance that sort of thing, because Chibiusa is so young. But it felt like a weird change.
Yeah, and I don't know. I stumbled across her, throughout my life, I've encountered several people, oh, is that your little girlfriend, your boyfriend? So, I think it would have been passable to, let it stand.
Yeah. I'm fine with it, because again, Chibiusa is very young. And, kids have not, she's maybe 10 at this point, I think. 'Cause she started aging. We can see between, especially watching the 90s anime, you can see that between, Black Moon and, Deathbusters, she's aged several years. But a 10-year-old doesn't know if they're straight or gay or bi or whatever. They're still figuring all that out. And, maybe they do. Maybe I know some people know from a very young age. But I'm, it's not, that one's not as much of, a weird deal breaker as, the previous example.
Right.
And I can I can understand wanting to distance that, especially, Chibiusa's pretty openly bi, at the very least.
Right. I want to say something, but I haven't seen, Horse Boyfriend, so I can't really, I gotta hold off.
Oh man, Horse Boyfriend sure is a thing. But I've mentioned the kitchen scene at the beginning several times. Just cause at that point I had the dub track on and I was just going back, I had both the subtitles on and the dub track on, and I was just going back and checking things for the notes, and Diana's dub voice is the actual worst.
So you didn't like it either, huh?
It is horrible. But that whole conversation is drastically different in the dub. Just skimming through it. Diana makes a weird joke about eating mice. Instead of just being... Yeah, in the dub.
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, wow, I didn't realize that, confectionaries had all of these memories tied to them. And then the dub makes a joke where they're talking about eating all the chocolate chips, and, too much chocolate is bad for you, but okay in small amounts. But the actual conversation is about, like, oh, we're doing these to get Valentine's Day dates and grasping happiness via baking. And Diana's like, oh, well, if Makoto's already great at baking, does that mean she's already grasped happiness? And then Makoto gives that line of, oh, happiness is the time when you're pursuing happiness. And Usagi and Minako kind of pat her on the shoulders like, you're not convincing anyone. And, that whole 3 o'clock fairy thing is taken out, and there's some weird translation choices that kind of pass off a lot of themes in the movie that are established in that scene, and, part of me wants to go through the whole movie and see what other changes were made, but, we don't need to be here all day.
Yeah. Can I interject real quick?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure I remember telling you, or talking about it in the last 2 episodes, that I cried during those other movies. This one didn't get me emotional. Like, I was really creeped out by the whole Pied Piper thing, taking the kids, and when Usagi was upset about Chibiusa being taken, like, that was, emotionally affecting, because, there was some great animation there, and just envisioning that sort of thing happening, it's terrible. But I didn't really feel like this one had, I don't know if it didn't have the emotional depth, because, like, the themes were really strong, and really striking, and, I almost wonder if maybe the dub changes were so drastic that it didn't hit me like it should have. I also admit I wasn't paying as close attention as I had to the others, but it wasn't like I was, playing a video game or something. Like, I should have, I don't know, it's weird. So I'm definitely gonna have to, I'm gonna watch it dubbed, or with the subtitles, and report back, but I really wonder if that maybe had something to do with my level of enjoyment this time. Like, it was cool, yeah, but it wasn't as impactful.
There are a couple spots where I teared up. It's definitely not as emotional of a movie as the other ones. I would say. I mean, I did tear up when we see, Chibiusa being taken away on the boat and Usagi's reaction. And, when they come back together and shoot through the tiny sun inside the Black Dream Hole. Right. There were a couple spots where I teared up a little bit, but I definitely didn't get as emotional as I have the past couple of times. But I do think that, like, I would definitely recommend watching it subbed, and, going back and taking that second pass at it, because it seems like there are so many huge dialogue changes, that kind of write over a good handful of themes in this movie.
One really, really touching moment, and maybe this is close to what you're talking about with, breaking through the sun. But when Usagi and Chibiusa were back together and they did their joint transformation, it was so sweet, and, like, the imagery for the transformation is, like, very intimate. Like, with their skirts flowing over each other, and then the way they, like, the transformation basically finishes, or they're finished with their clothes changing, and they're, like, almost in, like, a snuggling position and stuff, and it felt very maternal, and,
I think Chibiusa is supposed to be I've always assumed Chibiusa is supposed to be whispering something, because it looks a little like her lower jaw is moving.
Huh.
Just very slightly.
Okay.
But I'm not sure if that's just, the the way the background moving against them makes it look like that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always kind of perceived movement there. But I definitely, this transformation sequence they have in Supers, that's their general transformation sequence, and I have always thought it was very sweet.
Since, Usagi's, God anyway, and there's all this religious imagery with the show, I'm just gonna go ahead and bring up, like, Madonna art. It feels very much like that mother and child thing to me. Obviously, she's not nursing her or anything like that.
Yeah.
But, it's just very sweet, and, anyway. Again, I don't want to get weird, but, it's a cool thing, the whole, elevation or honoring of the mother-child relationship and the, anyway, I know women who've talked about how beautiful it is, and they enjoy having art of breastfeeding women and stuff, in that range. And again, I'm not saying everybody has to feel that way, but I definitely think it's beautiful. And the things I've been exposed to, I had a greater appreciation for it because of that, because it kind of evoked that kind of image to me, and I think it's cool.
Yeah, no, I think I've always thought that transformation sequence was very pretty, kind of even with, my childhood dislike of Chibiusa, I have always really liked that. And this was always my favorite movie. The Chibiusa movie was always my favorite one, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
But, I feel like this movie was a lot kinder to her than most of the 90s series. But yeah, no, I do really enjoy this movie. I enjoyed it a lot, even now, even kind of with this as I've gotten older, I'm like, what Badianu's doing makes zero sense.
Well, she's just a big fat consumer, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Or that's the only thing I can think. Alright, well, I guess we should wrap it up then, huh?
I guess so.
Yeah, so this was fun, again. I think I've done a poor job of keeping time, but, these will be here when... I plan to get this episode up, but, this little season in our Sailor Moon coverage will be here, and hopefully in... This is March, so hopefully in April we'll do something too. I just don't know what it would be on.
There's the Sailor V manga we could cover. There's a couple specials from the 90s anime. Ami has a special. There's a Haruka and Michiru special. There are a couple one-off manga chapters. So there's a couple things that we could cover that wouldn't take too much time to, watch or read or deal with, as opposed to, the musicals that are a million hours long.
Yeah. Is that Sailor V manga, is it like a full chapter, or is it a tankobon's worth?
It's like 1 or 2 volumes.
Okay. Well.
So it's lengthy, but not too horribly long.
Okay.
Maybe, a good hour's read.
Okay. Well, I'd be interested in that for sure, especially because it starts, before the show, right?
Yeah, it's all of the Sailor V stuff before she meets up with the group.
Okay. And, wasn't that Takeuchi did the Sailor V first and then went on and did Sailor Moon?
I think she had some of the stuff, she had conceived of a lot of stuff before Sailor Moon proper, and I think a lot of that was put into Sailor V.
Neat. Well, I guess it's time for awkward outro. Anyway, thank you for listening, folks, and, on behalf of the Toe Network and, Moonspeak, I am Ammit.
And I'm Sono.
And we will catch you next time in our web of lies, or maybe our black hole of misery? No, dream black hole. Whatever.
See you, everybody.